Ladies and gentlemen, this is episode 2 of Should Have Been a World Champ. Tonight's wrestler is William Regal. I'm Mark Flores with the Pay-Per-Review Wrestling Podcast. Keep in mind that if you do subscribe to the Pay-Per-Review Wrestling Podcast, you'll also get reviews of pay-per-views, predictions and reviews and analysis of those same pay-per-views. We also have a weekly show called A Smark and a Mark where we talk about the week in wrestling with brief news updates and SmackDown and Raw reviews of that very same week as well. If you're into film, entertainment, conspiracy theories, the Mark F Podcast channel has you covered as well with the Mark and Andre Show. Every Friday at 9 o'clock, Mark and Andre discuss various conspiracy theories, news, tidbits, and film topics as well. Should have been a world champ, William Regal. In several Facebook wrestling groups, from the Mid-Card Mess to the Good People Out Wrestling Fans, Pro Wrestling Nation, huge shout out to geeksandgamers.com. They all seem to unanimously suggest that William Regal should have been a world champion. Personally, I was expecting to see him in a few comments here and there, but to have him have such an impression is incredible. To me, it's great to hear that. In WCW, he was always pissing me off as a kid, but in this business, hate ultimately means that he was doing a good job. Early on in his career in World Championship Wrestling, WCW knew what kind of talent they had. Regal had great technical ability, and from his, for his lack of the typical wrestler appearance, he made up for it in the department of ring psychology. Think of him as the United Kingdom version of Jake the Snake Roberts. Having that kind of heat that William Regal was able to possess just by walking down the ramp with his smirk and his hand raised up and his royal English attire, having that kind of heat inside the United States of America works like gangbusters in the main event scene. In WCW, one highlight to mention is that he did beat Ricky Steamboat at Fall Brawl for the television title. So, in the eyes of World Championship Wrestling, this guy was poised for something bigger. Personally, to me, having the ability to tell a story every time you step into the squared circle puts you in a very star-studded group. I remember watching Regal face Prince Iaukea for the television title, and I hated Regal with such a passion. He was so good that 9-year-old me at the time actually watched a low-tier title with such attention that I still remember the match and the finish. Now, I just want to clarify that when I say it like that, I was really focused on the main event scene as a younger kid. Not a lot of people around my age at the time, about 9-10 years old, really essentially remembers the lower to mid card scene. Not as much as I'd like to think so. When Prince Iaukea beat William Regal, I was so surprised. What I especially enjoyed about the Iaukea Regal match was that Regal lost it in the ring. After he was defeated, he was selling that defeat like $1 million. And if you guys need to reference it, make sure you look up the February 19th, 1997 episode of Monday Nitro when he faced Prince Iaukea. Remember, that's February 19th, 1997 episode of Monday Nitro. It took me writing this episode to finally understand what kind of impact William Regal had. Thinking back at that moment, specifically, for me, really made me think about Regal being a WWF, WCW champion. Imagine him in programs with uppercard talent like Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, Sting, Goldberg, even the WWF. You have The Rock, Triple H, The Undertaker, Kane, etc. All these possibilities. And thinking of these scenarios made me look deeper into the rabbit hole of potential opponents for William Regal in the WWF. The more I think about William Regal's potential matches, look and see that in his situation, he would have to change a few things, to me, wouldn't have made the character work. Without a doubt, Regal's best work has always been as a heel. Having him as a face during his general manager role is comedic. Him going with Tajiri and having all types of tomfoolery when they're going with their backstage segments. I thought that was funny. And it's crazy to look at it now, especially during the United Kingdom tournament when Pete Dunne is the mirror image of William Regal. And having William Regal tell Pete Dunne, telling him off amidst the tournament, it just threw me off because it's just funny seeing a younger version of William Regal getting told off by his actual protege. So let's get back to where we are here with the potential matches for William Regal. So while we have Regal as a heel and his best years as a wrestler were from 1996 to 2003. We have the main issue as to why William Regal was never champion. The New World Order was a heel stable and was by far the best thing to watch in 1998, and that is a definite fact. You could tell by the ratings every single time on Monday Nitro, every time they were on, the ratings would spike. So him facing any one of those guys in a program wouldn't have worked. It also wouldn't have worked because the whole stable of the NWO was heels. So a WCW World title would have been impossible. In that situation regarding him facing Sting, Goldberg, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Hulk Hogan, Flair, Savage, anyone in contention for the WCW World Heavyweight title, it's a matter of politics, star power, and getting muscled by one of the best factions in history. That stopped Regal and a lot of other superstars from getting a title in WCW at the time. In WWE, William Regal had to deal with tons of other factors that would hold him back. It would hold back any push for him at the time as well. Around this time, the Alliance was the hottest angle at the time in wrestling, and the two heavyweight titles were being occupied by upper card WWE guys. So you have William Regal from 1998 to the 2000s staying around WCW, a brief stint in WWE, and then in WWE, by the time he becomes a mainstay and a factor too, the Alliance angle starts to come in. Now, despite all these unfortunate scenarios that he was in, Regal wasn't plagued with the WCW guy moniker. And I say that because there's a lot of people that are quick to blame Vince McMahon for not letting a bunch of WCW guys get a lot of play within WWE. In comparison to Diamond Dallas Page, Regal had way more titles and accolades. As we all know, he even won the King of the Ring in 2008. Regal was hoisting a ton of titles during this time where we wish he had a world title. So keep in mind with this, guys. Looking back at what William Regal had, he still had tons of other belts, and he was still in the main event scene for a lot of time. I praise William Regal all day because of the way he made me hate him as a kid when he was a heel. He was able to tell a story within a ring. He didn't have the ideal body type, but if you're able to tell a story within the ring, that puts you in such a great place within any professional wrestling organization. Any person would disregard all that for that ability alone. Now, with William Regal's accolades here, in WCW, he was a 5-time television champion. In WWE, 4-time European champion, 2-time Intercontinental champion, and a 4-time World Tag Team champion. So having 15 titles in 12 years of his prime, to me, is a lot more valuable than having him hoist any world title one time. You guys got to remember, sometimes we look at people like William Regal and other wrestlers, we think of them holding up that one world title for probably that one time. But we tend to forget that some wrestlers that we're describing, and then I'm going to be describing in this series for the upcoming weeks and months, we look back at them and we're like, well, that one world title isn't as valuable as the accolades that they probably have. And in William Regal's case, it's exactly what it is. You give him one world title versus the 5 times he was television champion, or the 4 times he was European champion, or the 2 times he was Intercontinental champion, or being tag team champion 4 times. That's a lot of belts to be hoisting up. So it's not, don't think of WWE and WCW underlooking and undermining William Regal's potential. They saw it. They saw that he had a great ability. It was just the fact that his best work was as a heel during this time from the late 90s to the early 2000s, early to mid 2000s, is that the hottest thing going was the NWO, and even the resurrection back in 2001 when they came back to WWE. I mean, when they came to WWE, but then you have the invasion happening as well. So it was all these hot angles occupying single superstar pushes. It was just factions were taking over at the time, and that's just something that had to happen at that type of circumstance. So it was good for television. And with William Regal, with that being said, I mean, Definitely should have been a world champion, but as far as trying to find good booking for him, it's pretty impossible to me, especially since you would have to have one of the hot heel at that time turn babyface, because to see William Regal trying to have a singles push as a babyface would have been a little too out of place for me to even try to attempt to book that. With that being said, I want to thank you guys for tuning in to episode 2 of Should Have Been a World Champion, William Regal. I'm Mark Flores with the Pay Per Review Wrestling Podcast, signing out.